In order to fully understand why the need of Agile, we should spend some time talking about the traditional methodologies, especially the Waterfall model as an extreme example of the traditional models. Traditional models are characterized by a systematic approach that carefully follows specific processes in moving from the requirements to the finished product. This is through a series of representations. In software industry, for example, we would have the user requirements documentation, then we would have the result of analyzing the requirements which we can document in, say, the specification document. Then the design document, then write the code to implement the design, write tests to test the code, and finally the working product. Detailed verification of each document or representation may be accomplished after every step of the way to assure the completeness of documentation. The original model was to view the development cycle as a waterfall from the concept through to the end of the product. More recently, incremental, iterative, and evolutionary processes have been adopted, but still with strong documentation and traceability mandates across requirements, across the design and the code. Such processes generally include detailed plans, activities, workflow, roles and responsibilities, and work product descriptions. The people who perform those tasks must be fully aware of the processes, and there is often a group of individuals who act as the process monitoring and controlling and educating. We call those people the quality assurance team or the quality team. Such plan and work products are usually signed off by a higher authority personnel. This to make sure there is a consensus that this is what we agreed upon to follow. Before we move to the next phase, any change to the agreed work is a big hassle and usually results in a wasted work, rejecting and scrapping existing work products, and it might take a considerable rework and effort to alter the design and implementation. Moreover, each development organization should have its own working processes. Whatever works best for them is agreed. The definition and management of processes is key to traditional methods. Traditional methodologies believe that if you leave it to the technicians, such as the developers or the testers, you will not have any control, and the output will be always unpredictable. For that reason, traditional methods are almost always associated with processes and process improvement. The processes need to be defined, standardized, and incrementally improved to provide control and to help to manage the product development. The strengths of the traditional methods are in the comparability and repeatability that standardization brings. All the developers would follow the same methodologies. By defining the way specific processes are performed and specific work products are formatted, any person trained to follow the process in the organization will know where to look for information, to interpret this information, and to know how to go about estimating common work. Plan-driven methods require management support, organizational infrastructure, and an environment where practitioners understand the importance of common processes to their work and to the success of the whole enterprise. Management must understand that processes are vital to the delivery of the product, and that skipping or ignoring any of them can add high cost and schedule risk to the project. The infrastructure for the plan-driven processes includes process asset libraries that encourage process reuse and process training for practitioners, and usually a process management staff that supports the maintenance of the process documentation. This was a quick introduction to the traditional methodologies. We will have a separate video to explain the problems associated with those methodologies. But for now, I need to summarize what I have just said. The traditional methodologies assume the following. The users are capable of defining explicitly detailed requirements for everything that they need without seeing it at all. The business environment is also very stable and the requirements aren't going to change much throughout the rest of the project. The requirements can be accurately documented in a way that developers are going to easily understand what needs to be done to satisfy those needs, and nothing will be lost in translation. And now, please have attention. The key point in traditional methodologies is that you need to have a very, very detailed requirements before you start the design. Imagine now if your software is to print an invoice. Then, the requirements from day one would be to indicate the size of the paper, table size, table header, font size, font color, logo size and position, header, footer, and so on. And the customer would have to sign off that. And if the customer ever had to change his mind, well, he will pay for it. He will pay for everything. He will pay for every single change in the project. And now someone might ask me, is all this possible? Does anybody still use the traditional methodologies model anymore these days? My answer is yes. For example, Magid has just told me that he worked with a couple of companies to port an application from one platform to another. A company used to create its software on Windows first, then port it to the Apple Mac. So, to port the application, everything is actually running in front of you with every specific little detail you can imagine on the original platform. Another company used to port games from PS to Xbox, or vice versa. Those are situations where the requirements were 100% defined upfront with complete details in advance. Also, Magid has told me that he has also worked with another company where the requirements were already defined in a separate project or phase. So, the software project was divided into two separate sub-projects. Sub-project 1 or A was to define the requirements document, and sub-project B or 2 was to build the software based on the requirements document defined in the previous sub-project. So, the requirements sub-project could be done using any model, using iterative ones, but the implementation sub-project would be easily done with pure traditional. So, again here, the requirements were 100% defined at the beginning of the project with complete details. So, my point here and the conclusion from this story is that there are situations where the traditional methodologies just make sense. Yes, those situations are usually rare in the software industry, but they exist. The assumption needed for the traditional methodologies are not realistic in many situations today. But the traditional methodologies approach has attracted some companies who have seen it as a way to get control and predictability over project costs and schedule. The truth here is that control over costs and schedules is just an illusion if the requirements are uncertain and are likely to change significantly. Finally, I know it's a long talk and hope that you didn't get bored of me. But as you know, need is the mother of invention. So we are trying to introduce the need to make you understand and realize the importance of the invention. And of course, the invention is the agile. See you at the next lecture.